Hello and welcome to part four of a five-part series on the future landscape of College Board student search. My name is Jim Rogers and I'm a Senior Vice President at Carnegie, working in enrollment strategy. And if you viewed any of my previous webinars, you know we're going to be continuing to talk about the changes with College Board search and specifically with its new feature called Connections. So today's goal is to prepare for the College Board Connections communications piece for this year's search cycle. And we're going to go into some details of some things you should keep in mind and be prepared for, as well as some helpful tips at the end to make the transition into Connections once it is live. So first of all, how do we get started with Connections is the question you're probably asking right now. So we've talked a lot about audiences and populations. So with College Board Connections, as we've spoken about in the past, you'll have a group of audiences in your plan, depending on which level of access plan you have with College Board. And once you have all of these audiences, you'll be able to then communicate to these students in a variety of ways. You will set up filters and a communication plan to reach out to these students through the College Board's system and to hopefully get the students to learn more, maybe inquire to your institution, like your institution. So if you're familiar with any of the College Board platforms or college search platforms that are out there, a lot of this will be based on students' interest and their engagement. So the communication plans are going to be very important to make sure that they're being engaged, they're starring your college so that your communication flow populates a little bit more frequently. So again, today what we're going to talk about is how we get started with the communication plans and a little bit about the timeline, of course, as well. So let's start about the comm plans. So the first thing to make everyone calm down is to make everybody think, start small, okay? You have up to 10 plans and up to 12 messages per communication plan. But that does not mean that you have to set up every single one of those plans immediately. In fact, we're recommending that you set up just a handful of comm flows in the beginning as we all get to learn the system a little bit more and figure out what's working and how your conversions are and build from there. So like with everything else, we always like to start a little small and kind of pilot this program out and see how things go for you. You're going to want to structure your communication plans by the cohort, the geography, the academic ability, perhaps their GPA or their score, their SAT score. It could be obviously based on what region of the country they're in. Maybe it's an in-state program or an out-of-state program. Maybe you want to speak a little differently, of course, to your juniors or maybe your sophomores based on where they are in the college search process. So consider what needs you have for segmentation as well. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that throughout the presentation here. So let's get into some of the details. So with the College Board communication plans, if you're familiar with your CRM, every CRM typically has what we call drip marketing or drip communications. And so similarly, the College Board will be set up this way with their own platform. So every message will start on what they call day zero. So the first time that student enters your communication flow. And again, if you set up these communication flows in your CRM, you might be very familiar with this terminology. So think about day zero, meaning the very first message goes out when that student enters the communication flow. And also another thing to keep in mind is that there will only be an ability to communicate to these students at a minimum of 5 days in between each of the plans. The focus, of course, is not to bombard these students on a daily or every few days, but making sure that they have a little bit of a time to digest what you're sending them, maybe do a little of their own research, and when they're ready for that next message, it will come to them over the next 5 or 10 or 15 day cycle, depending on how many messages that you decide to build out. Also, messages can be segmented. So in the beginning, it can be a very general message that maybe goes out to the entire population, but later you want to talk a little bit about specific majors or maybe their academic level, scholarships versus need-based financial aid. Again, if you set up communication plans in your own CRM, it's going to be a very similar process. So you really have to think about the strategy behind it before you start building these out. So again, going back to my former point, starting small is important so that you have some wiggle room there and you can kind of change those messages. If you want to do stop a message and kind of start over later on in the year, you can do that. But we want to make sure that you've got a good number of messages going out and the ability to expand upon that as you learn a little bit more. Also with the call to action, we know with every message, we want the student to take an action or engage with you. And there'll be 3 different options. Of course, you can just have a general message go out where there's no call to action. There could be some, transactional type things, maybe just talking a little bit about the institution or maybe some events coming up. But also when you're sending out things like events or maybe, learn more about us, they might want to go and research a little bit more, or they may be ready to fill out an inquiry form. So again, just like with any other communication strategy that you have, you want to think about what the message is about and what the call to action should be. So if you want to learn more, if you select that in their platform, what that will do is take the student directly to the Big Futures profile for your institution. So again, just like the words say, they're going to learn a little bit more about you, but maybe there's some messaging that you really want to start to try to drive that student to an inquiry. So maybe they learn a little bit more on the first message, or maybe the second one, and maybe the third message, you're introducing the inquiry form directly to your own institution CRM, and they can request more information as they would do on your website or throughout your CRM as well. But onto the right here, you'll see a little bit of the graphics of what you can expect once you're able to get into the communications module in College Board. So you'll have a message set up. Again, we definitely say make sure you mark it clearly, make sure you're being descriptive so you know what messages are going out to who and when. And then also when you set up each of these communication plans, I mentioned earlier that you will have a pool of students from all of the different audiences that you've selected. And as a reminder, the audience is a cohort. Could be the group of 25s, class of 25, or maybe 26 and 27s, which is a combined cohort. And then again, you want to think about what you want to say to them and who that population is. So again, when you have, say, if you have 20 audiences and X number of students are in that audience, when you go to build your communication plans, you'll be able to actually kind of fish in those audiences to say, okay, let's grab everybody that meets these specific criteria within those filters. So which graduation year, where they're coming from, what their academic ability is. So again, similar when you're setting up information in your own CRM, you could do the same thing here. Now, again, I'll give you a few more graphics to kind of show you what it will look like when you get in there. So on the right here, you'll see the graphic of day 0, 5, and 10. You have the different messages that can be sent out. And you can notice on day 10, it actually segments out that particular message in 4 different messages. So that could be about the passion for a major. So one could be business or comm or whatever it might be. So again, you can have a lot of flexibility when you go into this to make sure that, sometimes you're speaking to the entire group of students that fit those filters. And at any point that you decide you want to segment out your communication, get it a little bit more granular, speak a little bit more to their needs, that's what you can do as you get through this. And again, it's going to be a little bit more of a strategy conversation you're going to have internally, but hopefully you've got a lot of these plans already set up or in process for this coming semester. And a lot of this could be simply taken from your current search population communication plan, and just basically recreating it into the College Board. And you might ask, do I want to recreate the entire thing? Do I want to do 1s or 2s? It's really up to you how aggressive you want to be and how much content you want to put out there. Like I said, you can start small, but the good news is if you've already got these search plans set up, or if we at Carnegie are setting those up for you, we can consult on how to easily move those into the College Board platform, so you're not recreating the wheel if you already have a great com plan set up. It'll just be a little bit of maneuvering and tweaking of how to set up those filters and making sure the right students are getting the right messages as well. And like I mentioned earlier, make sure you label the messages clearly. As we know, once you start to build a communication plan, especially if you have 3, 4, 5, 6 of them built out, and then you've got 10 messages, you want to make sure you have a very clear strategy and how you're kind of bucketing these students into each one of these communication plans. And the specs. So a lot of the questions have been also, well, what do I need? What kind of skill set do I need to build these out? Again, till we get into it, until I get into it, I can't tell you how easy or difficult it may be. But one thing to keep in mind is we need to make sure that the specs for photos, for character limits, the messaging content stays within the College Board parameters. So you'll see on the screen right now, the optimal photo size needs to be 2048 by 2048. You'll have a header message. You can see on the right, orange is your color for this particular example for this institution. And the 50 character limit for your headline is required. And then you can't go over 3,000 characters in the message content. So again, this is exactly how it's going to look when you go out. It'll have those 3 pieces: the header, the photo, of course, the content, and then, of course, like we mentioned earlier, the calls to action. I already mentioned it goes to Big Future School for Learn More, or it would go directly to your school's RFI form in your CRM if the student decides to inquire directly from College Board Connections. And kind of, wrapping up this short and sweet kind of tips on connections. The first thing, again, if you have not renewed your College Board plan, simply go to your College Board interface, right where you would purchase names, and you can go right in and add the plan right there, nice and easy. And again, you'll see the plans on the screen here. I've shared these with you before, but you have Access A through Access H. Another good reminder I mentioned last time also is as long as you renew your plan by October 23rd of this year, they will double the audiences that you see on the screen here. So again, an example, if you've got the 100,000 name package and 30 audiences, and you're renewing at the same level or higher than you did this current year, they will automatically double those audiences. Unfortunately, if you did not subscribe this year and you stayed on the paper plan structure, that does not apply to those institutions. And we also have until November 6th, until Connections is going to be rolled out. So another thing to kind of, step back and relax a little bit. This does not have to be done on September 1st when the College Board plans go live. You do have time to get everything in order in the next couple of months to be ready to launch your first communication on November 6th. Also, make sure, I've always mentioned this before, but make sure you're setting up a very specific RFI form in your CRM so that when students do inquire, they'll be going directly into your CRM, and make sure you're triggering those students, of course, to be an inquiry at that point. And I think that's an important point to keep in mind, because when these students are getting search emails from your own CRM, but then they may be also getting these additional or maybe identical messages from the College Board platform, you want to make sure these are only going to prospects. So if you've already purchased them through traditional search, they're going to get your message through your CRM. But the second that they raise their hand in College Board Connections, they should move directly into your inquiry campaign or your app generation campaign. So again, very important to make sure you're kind of like thinking about the different pathways these students are coming through and making sure they're not going to get duplicate messages as well. And also very important to make sure you know that they are coming from Connections, so you can do some ROI analysis at the end. Also, make sure to configure your first source origin codes in your CRM to make sure that College Board Connections is one of the first sources. Again, ROI is important. You want to make sure that you're able to evaluate your strategy at the end of the year. Another great tip is on the College Board website, and I have this link, which will be in the slide deck provided to you, is the online resource guide that has how to create the profile, how to set up the comp plan, and with very detailed instructions, as well as the audience planning workbook. So there's a full Excel spreadsheet that is a working process where you'll go through and click a bunch of, or put a lot of X's and yeses and no's in places, and it'll basically tell you which audiences you might need and give you those totals as well. So again, definitely check that out online. There's a lot of great information out there for you. And as always, putting out the timeline, like I mentioned, right now is just get that subscription renewed. We'll have our final webinar on this 5-part series in September. As always, alert your staff of what's coming down. Hopefully they're watching these webinars as well, and making sure your Slate team has the support to implement and configure everything we talked about today as well. Also, one important thing to keep in mind always is in about a couple of weeks from now, or whenever you're watching this webinar, at the end of August, the subscription for the current year will expire. So if you have any names available that you have not purchased, you want to make sure you wrap up those purchases by the end of this month. And then, as we all know, September 1 will kick off the new year with Connections and, of course, traditional search as well. And as always, we are here to help. Many of you might be our institutions we're already working with. So if you are working with any of our name by consultation strategists, we will be there to consult and help you get through this. And if you are not or need some assistance, please feel free to reach out to us as well. I share this slide every time as well, but oops, right back there. Just some quick links again that will be in the slide deck so you can learn about our College Board student search process. If you do decide you want to partner with us, that would be wonderful. But all that resources and all of that information is there for you. And as always, thank you for tuning in on this number 4 series. And we have one more to go, so I hope to see you all there. Thank you.